Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome. I think that there may still be some folks who will join, but we're going to go ahead and start so that we can get going. So my name's Tatiana. I'm the director for the MFA in Visual Art at VCFA. Thank you so much for joining one of our offerings to the college's Friendsgiving lineup. Earlier today, we had alumnix Gino Luketic's performance, which was great. And we're really excited for Julie's performance tonight. I have the pleasure of introducing Julie, but before I do that, I want to remind folks to please keep yourselves muted during the performance, as this will help ensure that we have the best audio experience for everyone. So, Julie Graves Krishnaswami produces artist books, interventions, performances, works on paper, and textile fiber-based materials. Recent exhibitions include the Eli Center of Contemporary Art, the Yards Collective, the National Collage Society, the Turner Center for the Arts, and several others. Julie is an artist, researcher, educator, writer, and licensed to practice law in New York State. If you've met Julie, then you know she is whip smart, inquisitive, and tenacious. I have had the pleasure of being privy to the performance that she is about to do tonight. And I think that those three adjectives, whip smart, inquisitive, and tenacious, are fitting for what you are about to experience. So thank you, Julie, and enjoy, everyone.
Goals, background, internalization, lightning speed, sensitivities, position, get carried away, grammar books, fact-finding, objection, predict, surrogate remedy, invisible, personnel, pride, citizen, Cleveland Board of Education versus LaFleur, bodies, sight. You can be the same as men, and then you will be equal, or you can be different from men, and then you will be a woman. Commerce. Emerging. The expanded women's interest. Who decides? Executive business. Classes left out. Clear line, new business, People versus Anderson, Reed v. Reed, Ella Walker. 1971, autonomy, full autonomy. Exclusion, time, logical conclusion, Ginsburg rule, finality, lock, standing, crime bill, 6 months to a year, over 300 cases on death row. Every prison in the state of Alabama is a violation of the 8th Amendment. Pittsburgh Press Company versus Pittsburgh Commission on Human Rights. Economic, widgets, white woman's gaze. Internalization, transcripts, cry, or versus or. Worcester versus Georgia. Timetables, original. Form, system, study. Bracketed, inside, outside, distinctions, lead or follow, historical moments, act, perform, panel, dig, autonomy, domestic work, screening, well qualified, highly qualified, hearings, Hugo Black, Ashley Biden, framers, distinctions, Frontiero v. Richardson, date, central, hypothetical, factors versus elements, chronology, prepared statement, angry. Eyes moving around the page, Brett Kavanaugh. Artifacts, discrete category, checks and balances, 1971 child care legislation, institutional, toxic, amendments, constitutional rights. Operation Califano v. Westcott. Empathy. I am not looking at you in the face. Conditions of possibility. Opinion. When do you follow? When do you lead? Abortion. Civil disobedience. Pacifist strategies. Goldman Court. Crook v. Alabama. Victim. Language. Advocate. Patricia Williams. Clerical. Air Force. Societal changes. Mother's benefit. Broadcast. Rationale. Read on back precedent. Testifying. 1979. Pillar. Purple. Caesarean. Authority. Witch. W-I-T-C-H. Unintended consequences. Silently correcting typos. Carol Mosley Braun. Bureaucratic systems and rules are expressions of values. Whereas, performing politics. Orientation towards. Institutional litigation. Casey. Methodology. Altercation. Realism. Past history. Flack. Speech and debate clause. Continue. Califano v. Westcott. By necessity. In between. Leave it. Competition. Effective labor. Suggestion. Courage in complexity. The woman identified woman. Sensible person. Legislative remedy. Suggestion. Strict scrutiny. Liability. Compliance. Subject. Limitations. Process. Furniture. Zap. Alabama prisons. Chairperson. Chairman. Chairwoman. Business cards. Political dead end. Rehear. Reform. Corning Glassworks versus Brennan. Public opinion. Explain the case. Intersectional space. Conversation. Grandmothers. Stand up. Teacher. Skinner versus Oklahoma. Trend. I ask no favor of my sex. All I ask is that they take their feet off the backs of my neck. Autonomy. Senators. Unsuccessful. Employer. Exclusion. Fort Bragg versus St. Francis. Madison lecture. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Classification. Classify. Sharon Frontiero. Legislative compensation. Dred Scott. Obstacles encountered. Scar. Scab. Wound. Love. 4.1. Non-communicative component of speech. Speaking truth to power. Margaret Thatcher said, there is no such thing as society, only individuals. People were uncomfortable dealing with women. Bright line. Footnote. Stories. Example. Experts. Reed v. Reed. Enduring. 1970s. Jane. Language is incomprehensible. Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Judge Constance Baker Motley. Past history. Beyond the zone. Standing. Dedicated. Quest. Spectator. Davis versus Classman. Gossett versus Cleary. Genuine. Factors. Echo. Ready-made. Kahn versus Shevin. Amplification. Resignation. Echo. Legal fiction. Genuine. Benign. Either or. Favor. Same. Straight. Strain. Korematsu. Enemy. Privacy. Ninth Amendment. Maybe if the legislature were full of women. Father figure. Sarah Grimke. Decay. Robe. Degrade. But and. Angela Wright. Lemon test. free exercise, abstract, straight, sit still, sit straight, sit up. Forms of legal opinion, equal protection, equality, President Clinton, whole person, hesitate, Feinstein, gender, we the people, ERA, Nita Lowey, opinion, single sex, extension, no fault divorce, the waitress, street, deeply held, clever, gender discrimination versus sex discrimination, earrings, brooches, suits, belts, nylons. Timeline, Welch v. U.S., translation, Rosie the Riveter, retreat, unsuccessful effort, military is special, committee, inhospitable to reform, clerk, class privilege or status, remedial, research, public engagement, patterns, criticality, want, label, beige, gray, neutral. Controversy, sex, Ida Phillips, power is oblivious, site of rupture, recess, puzzled, but, open-ended clauses versus broad clauses, death penalty, finality, Walker versus Jones, service, home, unionize, TV, backlash, nominee, nominate, decay, context. The world could be different. Property, growing up with the experience of anti-Semitism, Susan Struck, power dynamics, tolerate, day-to-day, trouble, intergenerational, meet. Good advice can come from staff people. Shelter, bounds of authority, distracting associations, Congress. Resources, Powell Commission report, things are the way they are until they aren't. Plan, discrimination, daycare, congressional hearings. Text, ask, female judge, female justice, Women's New Deal, ERA, restrictive covenants, when political avenues become dead ends, early voting clauses, early shift, dead end political process, primaries, uncomfortable, protection, balance, imbalance, defer, deference. The pedestal sometimes becomes a cage. The Me Too movement, Lavender Menace protests, critics of the courts, sitting to read, sitting in boredom, sitting in protests, sitting in class. Liberty Mutual Insurance versus General Electric versus Gilbert. Subjective, man of a different age. March, election, cabin, heard, unhearing. Assault weapon, daughter. You can change the world by changing a very small part of it. Catherine McKinnon, benefits for parents, inflation, remarks, tension. We heard each other into speech. Fundamental instrument of our government. Movement, private rights of action. First, gender versus sex, jury, telephone, work, enlightened, Persephone's rape, shut out of the political process, sexual harassment, remedy, City of Louisiana, Department of Power and Water versus Manart, judge, justice, implication, habits, temporarily legislating, legislative remedy, beyond the text, 1968 Miss America pageant, theatrical staging, reason, resources, there are no mistakes, legislature, unemployed parents, literacy tests, administrative state, Coker v. Georgia, witness, interviews, multiple registers, mentorship, Dred Scott, behind the scenes, under the bed, disqualify, particular case, arms, local, preempt. How can you legislate if you are not well fed? Local, possession, bartending, Delphic oracle, recording, oblivious purpose, family tree, Diaz versus American Airlines. Clause, controversy, sex, Ida Phillips. Site of rupture. Genuine, benign, favor, strain, enemy, Horomatsu, privacy, Ninth Amendment. Maybe if the legislature were full of women. Sarah Grimke, father figures, decay, robe, ERA, gender, Senator Dianne Feinstein, hesitate, President Clinton, floor, equality, equal protection, form of legal opinion, whole person, sit straight, free exercise, knowledge and benefits provided under the law, lemon test, sterilization, terminology, guns, sleep, Buck versus Bell, answer, legitimacy, choice, mother and daughter, discomfort, blind spot, hearts, poverty, ordinary, hardworking, toil, audience, poverty, principle, Federalist Papers, legal fiction, legislative tyranny, deconstruct, Lochner cases, paper, judges do and must legislate, facts, obstacles, philosophy, predict, voice, Duran versus Missouri, Harlan, male supremacy, patriarchy, Korematsu, intersectional, advocate. What is the point? Debt of women's rights movement to the civil rights movement. Longer lifespan, equipped, clarity. Wrote, as written. Agree, people, bright line. Limits, silencing. Separation, Scully right. Construe, questioning, question. Vote. Sister citizen, social, public, date, James Madison. Accountability, political branches, provide, no choice. 1964, barriers. Useful to know how discrimination influenced your life. Industry, workplace, salaries, 1994. Eighth Amendment, Social Security numbers, haven for reform movements. Shall, may, must. Legal pads, typewriter time. Clarion call. We have a constitution which has worked marvelously for 200 years. Jury, calendar, intermediate scrutiny, systems, apply, Thornburg versus ACOG. Baseball bat, stepping point, young, substantive, choice. Example, both, underpinning, poverty, 1939. U.S. v. Miller, local, equal dignity, stand by, autonomy, worthy container doctrine, either or, Gwendolyn Hoyt, unlearning, straight, phone records, Carol Mosley Braun, Shaw v. Reno, enjoy the power, inclusion, final, concur, rationale, hidden, memos, appellate court, inheritance, arrived, single, literacy test, door, bounds of authority, within the bounds of authority, choice, lead or follow, men talk like this, housing alliance, unconscious bias, women of the world unite, women of the world work, women of the world unite, fundamental, fact-finding, balance, Judge Goldberg, political questions, Anita Hill, agenda, galvanize, safeguards, equal citizenship, need, model, quota, body of decisions, married, take action, Struck versus the Secretary of Defense, Baker versus Carr, the sound of typing. Fairness, political crimes against women, investigate. I am not looking at you in the face. Listen, good advice can come from staff people. Indignities, conscientious objection, love, speech act, procedure. What would it look like if people believed those who were oppressed? Reasoning. Sleepless in Seattle. Children, forget. Outside of the field of vision. Diary, birth control, do away, public schools, levels of address, Weisenberger versus Weisenfeld, family, connections, credibility, objections, object, Senate, ready-made, emotional sensitivity, empathy, qualify, conflict, bondage, Leahy versus DC, trance, classes, Justice Harlan, grounds, people forget how things were, comment, barriers, many years, having a life at home and a life at work. Things come together. Concrete, what would Congress want? Scare, keep scarce. Attachment to the workforce, staff. Microaggressions, secretary, let me speak the truth. Missouri versus Jenkins, efficiency, constitutional responsibilities. Footnotes, public funding, post-World War II, temporary legislative amendment. Cables, apply, unwritten. Biographical details. First 100 years, mayor, power, apologize, exclusion, professional women, affirmative action, constitutional rights, hiring, emotional labor, extension, strike down, Angela Wright, Life World, set aside, date rape, Eleanor Norton Holmes, Nita Lowey, Barbara Boxer, challenge. Rough proportionality, attack, dialogue, talk, wrote, violence, intent and knowledge requirement, reconstruction, bold, Biden, translation of power, who is enjoying at the expense of whom? Interstate travel, read as a whole, decisions, line of decisions, finality of judgment, compete, interstate travel, New York Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, step, division of labor, questionnaires, left out, watch, antagonism, rule, exception, pregnancy. They can be anywhere. Subject formation, the present, South, general propositions, balance, 1987, genealogy, equal opportunity, dissent, clarification, Kevin Powell, property, growing up with an experience of anti-Semitism. Tolerate.
Actually, I'm gonna have to go in front of you to get the.
That's okay. Thank you for watching.
Hi, y'all. Welcome back. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Julie's been very gracious to be able to offer some time to have questions and conversations, and I think at this point we're a small enough group where I think folks can just hop in, and please feel free to turn your camera on, turn your view to gallery view so we can see each other, and yeah.
Review. Thanks for watching. Thank you.
Does anyone want to open it up with any questions or thoughts, or or Julie, is there anything that you want us to reflect upon or think about, or that you'd like to say?
No, I'm sort of tired. And so thank you all for coming. It's so great to see so many faces.
It's great to see you again, Julie. That was
Thank
beautiful.
you, Allison. Thank you. It's good to see you too.
There's some nice comments in there too.
If anyone has any questions or...
I'll be right back. Let me just...
Can you speak just a little bit about
Yeah.
where you generated all those, like,
Oh,
what was it, hundreds
Yeah.
of words? Or
oh
thousands?
yeah. It's a whole file drawer, and each word, I can show you, has, or each index card has a word that's typed. And so what, so actually reading many of the cards is somewhat challenging during the performance because it's a, an old vintage typewriter that I used to type the words. So all the words were generated from my research, which was basically reading, watching the Supreme Court hearings, the Senate Judiciary hearings for the first women Supreme Court nominees, and then some of the females that have testified as witnesses. So I would watch the hearings or read them and, take note of significant words and concepts.
Yeah, it's just such a laborious piece. I mean, I really think it speaks to the, what struck me was just kind of this internalized fury. Like I could just feel like, even though you're very contained, there was this almost there was no desperation at all. It was more just very methodical, and it was an endurance piece, Julie. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's intentional. I mean, I think that endurance is that these are concepts and words and situations that we endure. And some of them are historical. I mean, there's a lot of them that come from a lot of the words and concepts you can hear out of context, but one knows the context, right? Even if you don't know the even if you don't know the exact reference, you have a reference to the context, and that creates some emotion, I think, and affect and feeling. But at the same time, we hear these words and these concepts in our everyday lives, and we have to be stoic. So I was trying to get some of that across.
Certainly did.
Thank you.
I have a
Yeah.
question. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Sumru. It's so good to see you.
So I'm just curious where you think you're going to take this project, if you're continuing with it, and how you see it evolving over time.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting thing. So I've done it a few times now over Zoom and on YouTube, but I really want to do it live. And I've thought about ways of making it even more of an endurance performance. I have more index cards. I have a file cabinet that I was thinking of incorporating. But mostly I want to do it. I want to do it live, and there's much more to research too. Like I have many more words that could be added. I mean, I could do it all day, frankly. Yeah. So if you have any, if you know of any opportunities where I could do it live, Subaru, let me know. I mean, and I'm happy to keep doing it online too. Like that's fun. I just need my producer to help and with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Julie.
Hi, Amy. It's so good to see you. Thank you
I
for
know.
coming.
Of course, of
I love
course.
your shirt.
Oh, thanks. I know. I figured I had it on all day, but I was like, oh, it's kind of perfect for
It's
tonight.
totally perfect.
I put in the chat like words that jumped out at me, which was interesting because at first I was sort of
See myself.
keying into like the same things that I think Allison said, like that,
Yeah.
you know, your sort of controlled rage or the anger, but then you said the word empathy and that jumped
Yeah.
out. So I just started typing in my chat bar, like the words that jumped out. And so it was like empathy, grandmother, love, mother and daughter, hearts, voice, advocate, inclusion, emotional labor. And they're very few and far between, right? In that entire entire however many hundreds of words you just read.
I should count.
Yeah, but I was interested what other people sort of focused on as they were listening, or what you focused on as you were creating this piece. But for me, those jumped out because they're in such opposition to everything else, or almost everything else that you read. And, you know, do we take instruction from some of these words? And I mean, I take instruction from those particular words, but I'm just curious what other people zoned in on, or what you zoned in on.
That's a great point. I actually forgot that word was there because many of the words are dark, but yeah, that word is there. And you're right, you also found love and some words of relationships. Yeah, I'd be interested to know what other words like others focus on. I'm more thinking about, like, as I'm performing the piece, I'm thinking about the order of the words. And I've played with different orders in my rehearsals or in my practices. And I've always come back to the fact of, like, it's more interesting for me as like the performer. And I think it's more interesting maybe for the audience just to be random with the words. But yeah, it would be interesting to hear like what other words resonated with folks. And Chelsea, it's so lovely to see you. Chelsea is on, and Chelsea was a law student at Yale Law School, and I got to know her there. And she was also a master's student at Vermont Law School. I didn't know her there, but then we like connected at Yale. And so I'm sure, Chelsea, you recognized a lot of case names.
Well, probably not as many as I should have, but yeah. But I thought it was really just interesting. And I was just curious where you got I mean, it's so perfect having it beside, that old filing, box with index cards. And I was just curious how you got that idea. I don't know where that came to you from, because it just seems so appropriate, but.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think originally, as I started researching this piece, way before this was even a piece, but as I started to work on it, I knew I was working with these hearings. And this project actually started with Amy, who's on the phone. We were working on a show together, and I did another piece involving the Kavanaugh hearings. And I thought I was going to sort of use that. I thought I was going to sort of more fully develop that one piece. But in the last semester of my time at VCFA, my teacher, my studio teacher, Sharon Hayes, wanted me to use the same material, but do something completely new. And so I started watching the older hearings and reading them. And as I was doing this, I just took like scraps of paper and started writing the words. And then at some point I decided, well, I'm going to type the words, because a lot of the foundational gender discrimination cases came about, they predate computers. And so the briefs were typed by secretaries or by lawyers. And so I decided to start typing my notes. And then at some point I decided to use index cards. Amy, that's a good question. I should go back to my notes and figure out where I got the idea to use index cards. Or Chelsea, I think you asked that question. I'm sorry.
I know, it just evokes so many. I mean, it's the hearings for the women, but there's so much of like just evokes sort of a lot of what has typically been work done by women. The note taking,
yes. Exactly. Yep.
Librarians, and it just is so
It might have come from the fact, I do have these index cards, these old, it's funny you mentioned that, like old library cards. And the drawer I was holding is a drawer from a card catalog. So I have a card catalog in my studio that I use, and I was thinking about incorporating it into the piece. But it's, as a material, it speaks very loudly. So I need to think more about that. But it might have been just my love of card catalog cards. Like, they are these small things that were most people that created them were women. And I have them in my studio, like, as sort of like a material that is like inspirational. So maybe that's where it came from. I also, when I was studying for the bar, and maybe this will resonate with you, Chelsea, but I put everything on index cards, and I had for every subject. So I took the New York bar, and the New York bar tests like 20 subjects. And for each subject, I had a different color index card. So, and at this time, like, I remember going to I had to like find different staples, different office supply stores in the city to get different colors of index cards. So I just like them as a material. But I do appreciate like the history, and the use is very important.
It was very effective, I thought so.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. It's so good to see you.
Fun to see you too.
I think Yoshi, I saw your hand. Are you still there? It's so good to see you, Yoshi. It's so great to see you. Thank you for coming again.
Julie, I just wanted to say hello, and I know I said thanks for doing it live, and I guess I'm not there in person, but
no, nobody is except my dog.
This was so great, and I'm so happy to see you, and that you're continuing to work on this piece and going forward with it. I mean, it was wonderful to meet you at the studio visit, and I'm just so
thank you.
I'm just so honored to be here with you. So
thank you so much for watching it again.
Oh yeah, of course. No, every time you pick up on, I pick up on new things. I still always, for some reason, pick up on sleepless in Seattle. I think it's but also that people forget how things were. And I feel like, especially right now, as we're sort of coming out of the pandemic, so, like, I don't know, it just really resonates with me a lot. But I just think your piece is so powerful. And thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. And that line really quote really resonates with me too. That's from Justice Ginsburg's hearing, where she said that. And that resonates with me. And also that line, I believe, I'm fairly certain she said it, but that bureaucratic systems are reflections of values. I think that's really powerful. And then the other thing is, like, things are the way they are until they aren't. These sort of, like, we just sort of live with these things and we think they're the way they are, but they don't have to be the way that they are.
Yeah.
And the other thing that sort of always feels interesting to me is sort of the juxtaposition of, like, the death penalty jurisprudence that comes up. There's several cases that I mentioned that are death penalty cases, and there was a lot of discussion of of the death penalty in these hearings, which I think is something that's easy to miss, but we could be having the same, like, you know, these hearings was 1993, 1981, 1994. But as for the death penalty issues, like the very same things could be said today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really? No, thanks, Julie.
Oh, you're
Thank
welcome.
you so
Thank you
much.
so much for coming. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I thought it was really interesting how like you said like as far as like which words like popped out at us, but you very specifically kind of like I broke the fourth wall,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in looking at the camera
Yeah.
for particular phrases. And of course those,
Yeah.
well, the one that jumped out at me was which, where
Yes.
you spell out WITCH.
Yeah.
But I think that was really interesting where like you're engaging with your viewer in that sense, but it's almost like you're saying these words and phrases for yourself, but then you're also like very specifically like taking those certain often really powerful words and phrases and kind of almost confronting
Yeah.
the viewer with those
Yeah. I'm glad you noticed that, Allison. Thank you. That's very intentional. And I think like I think that comes from watching you know, the performance of government and you know, the court, and especially like if you just, you know, put on C-SPAN and you watch hearings, there's this like any sort of governmental hearings, there's a performance element, but there's also a confrontational element with a witness and a questioner. And also I think like being just a woman or you know, a person outside of the minority, you're constantly bombarded with, you know, you have to sort of, you're confronted all the time, you know, with things that make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, there was a stoicism to your performance that really spoke to that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's intentional, and that's from watching the performance of government, where there is this stoicism, and you know, when you have people questioning, when you have like members of Congress questioning witnesses or nominees about matters in which that witness or that nominee is an expert, right? And the witness is, or the nominee is so stoic. Like she's so stoic. She's not like, well, of course, like, you know, who are you talking? Like there is a stoicism that is there. Marcel.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for coming. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you so much. That was really
Oh,
powerful.
you're welcome.
I have lots of questions, but one is, can you talk? Well, yeah, okay. We'll just start with one question. Can you talk to us about this setup, like your space that you're in?
Yeah. So this is like my husband's studio, and this is just a black. So I built this black thing. Were you at VCFA this semester? I don't think you were. The semester before we met, I constructed a booth where I did a sort of a performance thing, and this is the booth that, and this is just sort of like in front of the couch. So, but I wanted a black neutral background because I didn't want, you know, I didn't want the setting or the space to be speaking. I wanted nothing. And then, I have a microphone, a good microphone to pick up the sound. But I didn't want the setting to speak.
Yeah. Well, one thing I am reading into the setting reading in the setting is this sort of corner perspective, right? And that's just like this.
Right. Oh,
like
no.
right
Right,
in your head, there's this
right
line.
here.
Like, well, when we were watching it, when we were watching it, like actually even right now in the frame behind the head,
Yep.
there's like corner
Oh,
angle
yes.
happening.
Right there. Yep.
And it's consequently Adrian Piper's cornered. Yeah. But like just this way that you're like, there's like this extra like spatial thing that's happening, right? To like emphasize, like you're making this case, and the space that you're in is like this extra layer of, meaning, which is really fascinating. But it's also like, in some ways it feels like frustrating too, because it's like, are we ever going to get out of this like cornered, right? Cornered situation. So that's like, that felt like kind of had this like extra emotional, like, moment to it. And then I was thinking about like just being like semiotics nerd and like liking the word index. I'm like, oh my God, it's index.
Yeah. No.
So I really like, I don't know if there was an extra, happy moment within that. I mean, like, in terms of like, yay, extra meanings happening. But so I appreciate
Oh, thank you. Yeah, actually, I didn't think about the corner as being
but the corner is
claustrophobic and confined. I didn't think about that, but that's really fascinating. I did want to convey the fact that like you never know when this performance is going to end.
Yeah.
And there's a very high level of tedium to watching someone read like words that you don't know, like when they're going to stop. And so I think that like tedium is probably related to that claustrophobic feeling. And now like I like this interpretation of the corner, and I think like that's right. Like you're sort of like maybe that's something I should play up for the next time I do this performance. And maybe if I do it live, like really maybe play up that corner.
Yeah.
piece. Yeah.
Wait, there is something else. Oh, well, that's okay. I'll think about it.
Thank you.
So much. This was really powerful. Oh, wait, I just remembered. Sorry. I was just thinking about like also like the labor. Like there was something about, like the index cards as being like this like index of like continual, ongoing, never ending task of this case that you're talking about, and just in general like this ridiculous gendered world. And all of that. So it's like the index of labor. So and then the quarterness. Anyway, it was like all beautiful. So,
thank you so much. So I didn't have this title. I changed the title a little bit from the first time I performed this piece. So I just called it A List of Words and Phrases. And I wasn't really that happy with that title, but in the meantime, I've been reading a lot about Polly Murray, and she used this phrase, confrontation by typewriter, to describe what she did. So if you don't know Polly Murray, like after this, go onto Amazon Prime and watch or rent. There's a documentary out now called My Name is Polly Murray. And watch this, and then there's a biography that came out recently, and the author, it's called Jane Crow. So Polly Murray was an African-American civil rights lawyer. She was born in 1910. So she lived in the South during segregation and Jim Crow. So but not only did she have to deal with, you know, being a Black person, but she also had to deal with being a woman. And she was also a queer woman. She never identified herself as a homosexual, but she had she tried to convince several doctors to sort of give her male hormones. And you know, at the time, this was in like the 30s, there was no language for this. We had no concept, there was no concept of transgendered. But Rosalind Rosenberg wrote this biography called Jane Crow, and so I've been reading this biography, and Polly Murray used this phrase a lot: confrontation by typewriter. So she, of course, like no computers, she used typewriters, and she would just fire off letters to newspapers, to Franklin Roosevelt, you know, far and wide with her arguments for why gender discrimination and race discrimination were wrong. And she called this confrontation by typewriter. So I use typewriters in this work, and then also index cards. So that's why I sort of wanted to, you know, adopt some of her language and call this like confrontation by index card, because you don't ever know when I'm going to stop with the index cards. So, yeah.
You spoke about this just a little bit earlier. I'm kind of interested in where you're going to take this as far as like with, you said you wanted to do more live performances, but I think it would be so interesting, you know, if this did go on for hours.
Yeah.
And you start to lose your voice.
Yep.
And you've got piles of cards around you. And I mean, it's not going to be fun for you. But
yeah,
I think like this could just, you could like go so far with it. Like I could just see the potential here is like powerful.
I would love to do that, Allison. Like I would love to do that
amazing.
live, like in person, not just over Zoom, and just do it as long as I could. You know, I could probably fill up, like my file cabinet has like 12 drawers, and I could conceivably fill up all the drawers and just go through it one by one by one by one. I have sort of like thought about that. But there's definitely enough words. And it wouldn't just be pulling from the dictionary. Like there's words there in this material. So if you have any suggestions or ideas where I could do that, I'm like, I'd love to.
You've got to do it. That would, man, that would be so awesome.
Well, it's like I mean, like I have to say, like your work has been so, your work has been such a model for me. So like having you here and talking to you about this is like means so much to me.
To be here.
So it's really like I mean, you know, endurance performance is about gender and confrontation and breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah, you can go so far with this. It's gonna be awesome. Like I could just see you ramping it up. Like, gotta do it.
Thank you, Allison. That means so much coming from you.
We are at time. Although I want to second the suggestion for endurance several hours. That's always the way to go, I think. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening and for participating in larger Friendsgiving events. I probably shouldn't be the one talking about this. That should probably be Jericho's territory to go into Friendsgiving stuff. But thank you so much, Julie, for agreeing to do this.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I take issue with your use of the word live. You were live.
Oh, yes.
This is live.
Yes. Oh, I
You met in person.
In
There's a
person, yes. Oh, you're absolutely right. This is live. Yeah, of course. In person, yes. Now there's that distinction between live and in person. Yeah,
Totally.
in person.
But it's great to see folks, and thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Julie.
Oh, you're welcome. So good to
Happy
see you all.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the time off. Bye.